I start again. Hello, I'm John Gartner, and this is the Duty to Warn vidcast. And today, our guest is Sherry Amatenstein. She's a New York City social worker and therapist, and she's the editor of the book, How Does That Make You Feel? True Confessions from Both Sides of the Therapy Couch. Inside the Debate. And recently, she wrote an article for Vox magazine called Inside the Debate Therapists Like Me Are Having About Donald Trump's Mental Health. Well, tell me, Sherry, what is the debate that therapists like you have been having about Donald Trump's mental health?
Well, it's should we warn people? There's the Goldwater rule, which is that we cannot diagnose somebody we haven't personally met and examined. But Donald Trump is just an outrageous example of someone who is not fit to hold public office and have his fingers on the code and all of those things. And I live in New York, so I've been witness to him for decades. And well before he actually ran for and won elected office. And he's always somebody that I've actually met him. So
interesting.
He's always somebody that, I mean, this is back when he was running the Plaza Hotel and, I went to an event he was at, and he's always just been someone who, as you know, is only concerned with himself and how people are perceiving him. And there's that endless void that it's like, feed me, feed me, feed me. I need praise, like the tree in Little Shop of Horrors, Audrey. It's never enough.
Right.
So, and, I hate to, look, what is mental health anyway? I mean, on the one hand, we're trying to not have people be stigmatized. Like 1 in 5 people do have some sort of diagnoses, depression, anxiety, whatever. So whatever normal is supposed to be, we're all different shades of crazy, in my opinion anyway. But there's functional and there is someone who is off the charts, like Donald Trump. And he has proven, I think, our fears to be accurate since becoming president.
Yes, well, you raised several points I want to pick up on. One is that maybe not all shades of crazy are the same. And so that some people have argued we're stigmatizing mental illness by discussing Donald Trump's illness. But maybe you could say something about that. How is calling a spade in the case of Donald Trump not stigmatizing the mentally ill?
Well, he is somebody who he's not walking around harming himself. I think all right, if you have somebody who is schizophrenic and unmedicated and walking around, sometimes they do harm to someone else. But I would say, on the whole, when people suffer from some sort of mental illness, the one that they're harming the most is themselves. In the case of Donald Trump, someone who has all this power and wields it or attempts to wield it whenever he gets his little psyche insulted, that's very dangerous because he holds all our fates in his little hands. Okay, I said it.
So he holds the whole world in his little hands, and he's a danger to others.
He's a huge danger to the planet. I mean, he just pulled out of the Paris Peace Accords. Now, certainly a politician is able to make a political decision based on their beliefs and hopefully based on facts, but day after day after day, he really is proving himself to be unhinged. All those tweets, there's no impulse control.
Actually, I wanted to quote your article, which you wrote several months ago.
Right.
And you said he has no impulse control, no ability to consider feedback. He's not normal, and that's dangerous. And I think all the things, what you're saying, and I agree with you, I think, is that all the things that you predicted or that you observed then, several months ago, as you said, have really seemed to be borne out.
Unfortunately. And also, I'm a child of Holocaust survivors.
I'm glad you came up to that.
Yes, and so definitely, I mean, I remember the day after the election, the morning after, because again, it was such a shock. We did not expect him to actually win, and I felt the way the morning after the election that Wednesday, I really felt the way I have only felt a few times in my life, like after a loved one dies, let's say, because it was such a mourning. It really felt like the death of something
Yeah.
sacred, and things felt unmoored. And the level of hatred and fear that has been unleashed by his campaign and now the election is very frightening to me and to many minorities, and it's just a horror. It's like taking us back. But I mean, the only good point about it is that clearly all this stuff was right under the surface. So it's this cesspool that you do sort of need to open it up so that we can look at it and say, just ignoring that it's here doesn't mean it's not here. We need to look at it, hopefully have some real discourse about it, and be able to somewhat put it at rest.
Yeah,
But no, I'm sorry.
well, I was going to say, in your article, you didn't mention being the children of Holocaust survivors, but I think it's a very important component of all this. And I wondered if you could elaborate more about this, about in what ways is Donald Trump like Hitler? We're not supposed to use the H word.
We're not supposed to use the H word. And it's just he's such an autocrat and just so permissive of horrific behavior toward others. I mean, during the campaign, to be promoting violence, to sort of seem to be advocating that some of his followers could do something to Hillary, to be, if when someone disagreed with him at a campaign, to be suggesting that his followers should feel free to beat that person up, drag them out. So, I mean, I'm not calling him Hitler per se, but this is certainly not someone who, in my opinion, and many people's opinion, should be the head of our hopefully still great nation. And I think we'll be able to survive this, but it is very, very frightening to me that all this hatred, fear, power mongering, and oppression is being permitted.
When you talk about his encouraging,
seemingly embraced.
Right, when you talk about his encouraging people to beat people up at rallies, it reminds me of Hitler's brown shirts.
Yeah.
I mean, this must have had some resonance for you in terms of memories or fantasies that you had as a child growing up about World War II.
I have never felt unsafe in my country before. And living in New York City. I mean, this is kind of like Jew Central. And
it's Little Tel Aviv or Big Tel Aviv.
pretty much. And yet there have been in New York City, as in many places, many swastikas, it's attacks on the subway, and not just toward Jews, but toward many minorities. And it really has felt reminiscent of like Europe in the 30s. It really seriously has. And as I said, I have literally never felt unsafe. I've had discussions with many friends and some family members who, feel like we should be ready to flee at a moment's notice. And, and there are those who say, well, Jared Kushner is all that. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. It's the permissiveness of hate.
Mm.
That's what's coming forward.
It's a good phrase, the permissiveness of hate. Yeah, because one of the things that we saw in the 30s is that the presence of a malignantly narcissistic leader like Hitler changed society. And Robert J. Lifton has talked about a term he calls malignant normality, where a malignantly narcissistic leader can change the reality for the society. And this is part of what I think you're referring to, is that you sensed a change in society itself as a result of Donald Trump's victory.
Well, what he does is he feeds into people's fear. And just even in the recent London attacks, I mean, to be attacking the mayor and to be wanting people to feel fearful and using it to promote the travel ban, it's just very telling. It's saying, yes, be afraid. Yes, be afraid. Because the more afraid people are, the more they look for the person who is the answer. Mein Kampf. Or, I mean, during the Republican convention, when Trump kept saying, only I can help you, only I can fix things. That's not realistic, but we're not dealing in realism. We're dealing in stoking the flames of people's fear. And when people are afraid, they look for scapegoats. And when people are afraid, they look for the seemingly tough leader, the big daddy who can take care of them. And that is what Trump, in his malignant narcissism, is looking to promote, to feed that void inside him, which will never be filled, because you can't feed it externally.
And we thought it couldn't happen here.
Yeah, we really did. We really, really did. And it's been quite a lesson for us.
You know, in your article, you talked about the Goldwater rule. You said if it's a choice between obeying some arcane, decade-old rule and doing everything I can to bring down a dangerous administration, there is no contest. I thought that was an important statement about the moral choice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to feel like I'm my parents' daughter. And my mother was extremely brave. She was a teenager in a work camp, and she risked her life on several occasions to save her friend who was ill. She actually stole into a crowd of Nazis around a campfire and stole a potato to feed her friend, and then realized she left a piece of her dress and went back and got the piece of the dress. So I feel like my mother is my inspiration. If my mother could do that, really physically, putting her life at risk, certainly I can speak out. And you've certainly gotten way more flack than me because you're so much more public with Duty to Warn and everything that you're doing. But, when I wrote that article, I definitely, got some flack for it. And it was just like, well, okay, it's fine.
Okay. I love the comparison to your mother's act of bravery, because when people have said to me, as many have, oh, you've been so brave, not the people who tell me that I'm a jerk and that I should die, but the other people, I kind of laugh because I think, how wimpy has our generation become? Your mother risked her life to steal a potato.
At 15.
At 15. Okay, and I'm 58 and I'm daring to actually express my opinion. Big deal. That's bravery. We've gotten too soft. That's my opinion.
This is the country where we're supposed to have free speech and be able to express our opinion and listen. And we don't do that.
That's right. If we're so afraid of our own shadows that we can't even express our professional opinion, look at the greatest generation. They risk their lives to stop fascism, and we're afraid to even make a peep to stop fascism here at home.
Right. And I think in some ways this is like a leveling. We need to go back to our roots and look at what the people who came before us did in the name of democracy and hope and help and trying to start this wonderful nation. So we need to be doing that, and we need to stick our necks out. And it's worth it.
Today is the anniversary of D-Day.
Oh, goodness, right, it is.
The longest day, the day on which tens of thousands of men died on that beach. That was so well portrayed in Saving Private Ryan, how violent and really terrifying it was.
Absolutely.
And
Fear is normal. Yeah,
we're afraid to face the American Psychiatric Association.
Exactly.
What wimps.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned your mom being a Holocaust survivor, and I do think that's so important. And one of the things that you learn when you're a Jew, or especially if your parents are Holocaust survivors, is this term never again, never again, never forget, never forget. And then I look at some of my Republican friends and family members who are Jewish, and I say, remember, never forget? You forgot.
Yeah. That does and I feel like everyone should be free to believe what they believe. But there's also, how do we allow people to believe what they believe without also taking advantage and trying to make what we believe what everybody else should believe, I guess. But, because since we all feel so strongly about this, which is, it's good to feel strongly, but it's not good to feel strongly at the expense of not listening to someone else and putting down other people for their opinions. And that has really been happening. And it starts at the top, and Trump, I can't put president and that name together. I can't do it.
We'll just call him the president who shall not be named.
Yes. He is, when you have a leader, and this is an autocrat, who does not want free speech, who does not want disagreement, who the idea of a town hall is not to listen to people who disagree, but to just bulldoze. That's not what this country is founded on.
It's anti-democratic, it's anti-American.
Yeah.
And it's mentally unhinged.
It is, and that's what we're talking about. He's really mentally unhinged. I mean, and I do believe that, the current tweet fest, as many of his tweet fests are, I don't know if it's because he is aware that what he's doing is a distraction, or from things that are coming up, right now the Comey is going to be talking, and he doesn't want people to really pay attention to that. So, there's brilliance in insanity.
I wonder if you worry, as I do, that as the Russian noose tightens and he becomes more cornered and more desperate, that he might become more dangerous.
Absolutely. For sure. Because when somebody, when a rat is cornered, they get more wily and more willing to do desperate things. And this is already someone who is willing to do desperate things. I mean, when you look at years ago, he really did. And I remember when this happened, this is someone so desperate for attention, he actually pretended that he was his own publicist and would call, people, what was it, John Smith? I forget what the name was.
John Miller.
John Miller, thank you.
His alias.
The alias. And it was, there was no attempt to even disguise his voice. It was clearly him. So when someone has that level of just narcissism, to really think I can put over this ridiculous farce on people and they'll just accept it due to the force of my will, that I can convince others, as I convince myself perhaps, that this is truth or normal or okay, that's unhinged. That's not okay.
And it's narcissism, I think, mixed with antisocial personality disorder. And in the DSM criteria, one of the criteria is use of aliases, which is such a rare thing. I don't think I've ever had a patient that's used an alias. And here's Donald Trump using an alias.
And just somebody who has never met a fact that he couldn't twist.
It's a great line. I like that.
Yeah, so it's ridiculous. There is no truth but what he feels in the moment he can say and get away with it. And when we look at his, his campaign talks, and even he does it during the election too, when he goes off the teleprompter, he's just all over the place. It's just this stream of consciousness babble. And it's frightening to me that people follow it. Some people follow it. And again, there's that whole, if I'm afraid, if my fear is stoked, I need to look for a leader, and then I will selectively believe what makes me feel better. And we all do that. It's something that we all do because it makes us feel better when we sort of stay in our lane and read things that, also that kind of go along with our belief system and what makes us feel safe. We all want to feel safe.
One of the questions people have about Donald Trump is, to what extent is he just a sociopathic liar? And to what extent does he believe the crazy things he says? It's not always so easy to tell. What's your thoughts about that?
I think sometimes he really just talks himself into believing it. And other times it's just him telling himself and also being fed by the people around him that, yes, by the force of your wonderful personality and charisma, which I've never felt he had charisma, but many do. So, okay, many do. I mean, we don't all believe the same things. Sure. He feels that he can just barrel through and convince people that what he's saying is legitimate. And I think you can't do that unless, at least in the moment, you believe what you're saying too.
Mm-hmm. I like what Lance Stotis said. He said, I keep quoting it because I love it so much, Donald Trump tells two kinds of lies: the lies he tells other people and the lies he tells himself.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us. Is there anything that we haven't said? Because I know when I do interviews, afterwards I always think of something brilliant that I wish I had said.
Right.
So you'll probably think of it 5 minutes from now. But is there anything else we haven't covered that you really want to?
Well, I mean, I do think deep inside him is this scared little boy still trying to please his father. And it goes from there. And, if he would let that scared little boy come out to play and give voice to it, then he could maybe become a whole person who can have a few different emotions, even some scary ones. I mean, it's and have that be okay. It's when we are so afraid of having these emotions that make us uncomfortable that we have to just stick to whatever storyline we think will help us in the moment, and that gets us into trouble. But in the case of someone who is president of the United States, that gets all of us into trouble.
Do you think he's capable of that kind of insight and self-discovery?
He has not demonstrated it. He has not. But, people who know him say he also has that, which again, sociopath can demonstrate that, like on a one-on-one or in a room. Supposedly he can be very charming and put that face up. So I think he sort of has a lot of different faces he can put up when he needs to, but in that way I think he doesn't really know who he is or where he lives inside him.
So is he treatable? Could you help him?
Somebody has to want to be treated. Somebody has to admit, I'm in trouble, I'm vulnerable. And unless they reach that point of being able to admit that, they can't be helped.
What are the odds of his doing that?
Doesn't look very high.
No, doesn't look too good. It's not looking good. All right. Well, thank you. Well, you were looking good today, and you were a wonderful guest. So thank you for your insights.
Thank you so
and
much.
Your thoughts and your sharing. I appreciate it.
Sure.
All right. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.